Hey everybody! In today's video, we're going to do an everything old is new again technique with spotlighting. Now you'll need two panels. I have a sticky mat in my MISTI, and I'm going to mark where I put the first panel with a Sharpie so that I can align the second panel the same way. You might be better than me and you might be able to remember where it is on the grid, but as you can see, my sticky mat is very well loved, and also I have squirrel brain, so it's better just to mark it. Now I'm taking some granite ink and I am lightly ink blending the first panel. The thing with spotlighting is you need contrast between the background and what you're spotlighting. And spotlighting is normally done by partially coloring an image and die cutting it and then coloring the die cut piece and layering it back onto the focal image. But this time we're doing it with a background stamp in this adorable rainbows and clouds bold print is what I'm using, because specifically it has a colorable element to it, which is what you need for spotlighting. So in my case, the obvious colorable element is the rainbows. That is what I will be coloring. It also makes for a very quick card when you're spotlighting because you're only coloring a portion of the image. You're not having to color the entire thing. Now I'm pointing out the bubbles between my stamp and the MISTI lid. This can happen sometimes if you just put your stamp on quickly like I did. So if you see inconsistent images or inking, when you are using a large stamp like this, the problem is not the stamp, the problem is those little bubbles. So I like to stand up and just give it a little extra pressure in those areas. You can also kind of lift up the stamp and try to reposition it without bubbles. But I just wanted to make you aware that you don't have a faulty stamp if this happens. Odds are, and it happens with photopolymer too, you can just trap a little air when you are putting the stamp down, and you can see right there me squishing that bubble out of the way. It's a very easy fix. So I'm now stamping the second panel, and you can see I've lined it up the same way. Also, just a note, this does not have to be perfectly aligned. If it's off like, a 32nd of an inch or whatever, we're going to be cutting it down. And I'm also going to tell you some tips for if you just get it completely off, how to fix it. So it's really no big deal. It's just easy for me to line it up with the little arrows. And so that's what I did. Now, even when I'm using a hybrid ink, just because of my climate, I do have to heat set before I color with alcohol. So I do recommend that step, especially if you start coloring and you're wondering why you're getting a little bit of ink bleeding. It's probably just your humidity level. Now with rainbows, I like to count the stripes. Everybody does a rainbow a little bit differently. I like to count those stripes and make sure that I have the same number of colors that are in my image. So I counted all of these to make sure that they were all exactly the same. Now I went and cut this down, cut the top piece down, and I'm going to show you how to align it. And you can see how much it pops, even just with a little bit of gray ink. I'm going to make this darker later on, but there's a lot of contrast already, just with a small amount of ink blending. Okay, so I'm using Olo markers, and I'm actually flipping the rainbows. There are 3 of them I'm going to focus on. So on the top and the bottom, I'm starting the rainbow at the top of the rainbow, and in the middle, I'm starting it at the bottom, just for something a little bit different. Since I do have 3 images, this gives me a lot of balance, the rule of 3s and all that. So I'm changing it up by flipping the order of the rainbow in the middle one. Now I'm using kind of brighter neon colors here. I'm not using traditional red. I chose a magenta instead. And this makes it look very kind of 70s and fun. The green I'm using is more of like a turquoise color, and that blends in a little bit better with my sort of Peter Max style of rainbow. So for all you Peter Max fans out there, you can come sit by me. I love Peter Max. This is very quick. As you can see, just coloring these little stripes. I'm finishing with this slightly less green turquoise for my rainbow. And again, you can see how well this lines up. You can sort of move it around. I did this wrong. You're watching me do it wrong. Sorry, it's painful, I know. But you can pick one of the elements. One of these little curvy clouds helps me get it lined up properly. Now, what may happen is it may be longer or shorter than your main piece. Just trim it down afterwards. That's no big deal. Also, if you feel like it's really off by like 1/8 of an inch and you would notice it, this one isn't. But what you can do is trim a piece of black cardstock down to mat the highlighted portion with, so you have a little black border at the edge, and that can cover up any kind of little inconsistency and make it seem like it's seamless. This one actually is seamless, but those are just some tips. If it's not, you don't have to worry about it being perfect the first time. Now, like I said, I want a little bit more contrast, so I'm going to add a little bit more of this granite ink, just make it a little bit darker all over. And the way to do this really is with pressure. I'm picking up the same amount of ink. I'm just applying more pressure. I'm not cleaning the brush off before I start to blend. And it really works great. And I think that that pops a little bit more. So I will just add a sentiment to this card. Head over to the blog to see the rest of the details. And thanks so much for watching.